You forgot something, but they've not forgotten you. Their deaths whisper and echo across the land. The ghosts of yesterday are here, and it's Japanese-only horror.
Ooh, it's All Hallows Spooktober o Ween's Eve. I'm Grave.
And I'm damned.
And this year, we wanted to do things a little differently and celebrate some of our favorite Japanese horror games that never made it over to the US.
Because of this, we gotta thank all the people that translated these ROMs and that made the emulation possible. This has stopped skeletons from fighting, and here are some spooky Japanese-only games that you can play right now.
But first, this video brought to you in part by Dollar Shave Club. Stick around to the end of the video to learn how you can get your starter set for just $5 at dollarshaveclub.com/SSFF.
Our first game is The Mansion of Innsmouth, or Innsmouth no Yakata, even though it says Innsmouse on the box, for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. And okay, I know what you're thinking. Yes, there was an actual horror game on the Virtual Boy. Oh, but wait, Panic Bomber had a horror theme for some reason. And then there was Jack Bros too. Wait, was the Virtual Boy actually awesome? But yes, this is the only true, full-on horror game for the Virtual Boy, which is kinda odd considering the red and black graphics suit a horror aesthetic so well. It was also the closest thing to a first-person shooter on the system. It is Japanese only, but not for content reasons, more likely because it was a late system release and there was no reason to localize a game for a system that flopped as hard as the Virtual Boy. Though there are rumors that there was a planned localization by Acclaim, but we could not verify these rumors. It is quite the collector's item, fetching triple figures on eBay, but emulation is here to save the day and your wallet. Plus, there's very little in-game text that isn't English, so there ain't much stopping you from enjoying this obscure horror gem. There isn't a lot of meat to the actual story of Innsmouth, but there are claims of it being based on a Lovecraft-inspired Japanese TV movie that opens like this. But The Mansion of Innsmouth, this game, is just based on Lovecraft in a more general sense. According to a translated instruction book from the hardworking heroes at Planet Virtual Boy, you are a detective who has entered the Innsmouth mansion in search of the Necronomicon. Upon finding the Book of the Dead, you learn that the insides of the mansion exist between dimensions, and escape will be no easy feat. This is kind of illustrated in the pre-title screen intro, but there's almost no other story in the game, which is fine by the way. Not every game needs to have a crazy story. So the point of Innsmouth is to escape the mansion. Levels are made up of simple corridors a la the NES games Fester's Quest and Golgo 13. To get through each maze-like level, you have to find a few items. You need the key to escape the floor, but you also need the black orb to show you the key's location, and the white orb to show you the path there, and both orbs to show you the exit, which looks like every other door and is easy to miss. You draw a map as you roam levels, and it's possible to finish a level with just the key, but where's the fun in that? The gameplay itself is tight, and moving from corridor to corridor is lightning fast. While there's a lot of depth and moving pieces, there isn't much variety between levels, and the whole thing becomes pretty repetitive. While you search for items, you also have to contend with monsters! Movement is with the left D-pad, but aiming is done with the right D-pad. Yeah, the Virtual Boy had two D-pads if you didn't know, and it works pretty well. The shooting is tough and clunky, but it gets the job done. You're also required to reload after every clip, which I thought was a nice touch. The aiming will be a sore spot for some, but I think it feels deliberately clunky in order to ratchet up the tension. And there's not much else to really compare it to. It's a stretch to call this a first-person shooter, but yet here we are in a spooky New England hell mansion shooting fish monsters in the first person. I only bring this up because it's the closest thing to an FPS on the Virtual Boy, and even though it was a VR machine, it's one of the very few Virtual Boy games that is exclusively played in the first person. Gee, can't imagine why this system failed. Ammo and health are in short supply in Innsmouth, and since enemies respawn, it's always best to avoid combat as much as possible. Similarly to Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, enemies have backsides, so if you bump into one but its back is to you, you can tiptoe away unnoticed and try and find a way around them. You are far outnumbered in Innsmouth, though your biggest enemy is time. You're given 2 minutes to finish levels early on, which extends a little in the later levels. Run out of time and it's game over, and if you don't finish fast enough, you'll hear this song, and you'll progress down, which affects your ending. There are 45 total levels, but only 13 in a full playthrough. Each level has a simple 4-letter password, and while all the maps are the same, item and monster placement is different every time you play, which does keep things a little fresher. How well you do on each level affects your ending, but the A ending requires you to complete the whole campaign from the start without dying, which I'll admit I had to use a few save states to achieve. The D ending has a pretty solid joke that's worth taking your time for. This is a really simple game, and while what's here is really good, there's no denying that there just isn't much to the Mansion of Innsmouth. The music is great, both melodically and atmospherically, though there's only 3 main level songs. Monster design is fantastic, though there's basically just 2 flavors, short and tall. Oh, and these. Again, all the levels look exactly the same. Though, because of this, it's easy to get turned around and disoriented, even with the map, which does make for some tense moments. And monsters Kool-Aid Man through the walls in later levels, which... fun! My first playthrough was 15 to 20 minutes, and once I got the hang of it, I was ripping through levels pretty quickly. I enjoyed this game quite a bit, but there just isn't much here, and I can't imagine non-horror fans would get much out of it. Still, I really enjoyed my time with the Mansion of Innsmouth. When you boot up the game, you are greeted with a strange name, IMAX. Or is that IMAX? I thought, that's a weird name for a developer, so I did some digging. For some of the Innsmouth team, it looks like this was their only game, but a lot of the team also worked on Toshinden for the Game Boy and The Ring Terror's Realm for the Dreamcast. One name in the credits did pop out though, project manager Hiroyuki Kotani, who would go on to direct Devil Dice, Sky Gunner, Mad Maestro, Chain Dive, and frickin' Patapon. Near as we can tell, while Kotani did many interviews for Patapon, no one ever brought up the Mansion of Innsmouth, which is, okay, not surprising, but a damn shame nonetheless. Anyway, Innsmouth no Yokata, or the Mansion of Innsmouth, is a must-have for horror collectors, but you'll be fine playing on emulation. I was. And once you're done, you can download some fan-made level sets, one of which, titled Mansion of Innsmouth All Hallows Eve, was released just last year in 2017. There's even a fan-made custom level editor, all brought to you by the maniacs at Planet Virtual Boy. Our hat is off to them for holding it down on Nintendo's weirdest system.
This next game has been requested for a while, and once I finally booted it up, I could really see why. Nanashi no Gemu, aka The Nameless Game, was released in 2008 on the Nintendo DS. Developed by Epix and published by Square Enix, The Nameless Game is best explained as The Ring. But not this ring. And with cursed video games instead of tapes. Your friend sends you a video game on your TS, aka the handheld system that's rocked the game industry, and suddenly mysterious, spooky things start happening. You soon find out that you only have 7 days to beat the cursed titular Nameless Game and survive. This is meta horror at its finest. You got the game, and then you got the game within the game. The game within the game itself is a nod to NES Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy titles, but this is not actually an RPG. These sections are short and are more like an adventure game where you occasionally solve puzzles and find hidden items to unlock the best ending. This section is played with typical DS orientation, but the main chunks of Nameless Game are actually played vertically. This is a bit of a pain in emulation, but it works well enough with the right emulator. This is how you play most of the game, in the real world, or in first person where you run around, dodge ghosts, and try to find the item or place that will progress the story. The world and areas you run around in are the real stars of the show here. The game finds a way to merrily drag you into what I can only describe as a Silent Hill's greatest hits of horror locations. Spooky apartments, spooky subways, spooky hotels, spooky malls. This is a game that is not about subtlety. 1 minute it's telling you that brainwaves are like Wi-Fi signals, and the next it's off to an abandoned hospital to have a good spooky time. Eventually, the game really digs into the meta by having you investigate the game design team and what would drive them to create the cursed game in the first place. No spoilers here because I really want you to play this game, but this feels like a personal look at the sacrifices small-time creators have to make to survive in a cutthroat industry. But, in my opinion, the story is not the main attraction here. It's all about the atmosphere. The sound design in this game is fantastic and requires headphones to really fully experience. Though levels are fairly linear, your goal is not always clear. Sound is used to guide you to your destination. Basically, things get louder when you face the direction you need to go in. The end result is subtle, tense as heck, and let me tell you, I did not want to leave this living room. The inner game doesn't share the same fidelity, but the song played in the game is catchy as heck and is reprised many times to haunting effect. Combined with a great attention to detail and world building in the levels, this game sells its scares in a way that I found genuinely impressive, definitely for a DS game. In terms of graphics, I'm sure you've noticed this game looks a little bit like a PS1 game, and honestly, it plays a bit like one too. Nameless Games' first-person segments play with tank controls modified for the stylus. Moving forward is mapped to the top and bottom of your D-pad, this is holding the DS vertically of course, while the left and right controls turn your camera. Your stylus also controls direction and movement, but more crucially controls your speed, allowing you to run if you press forward and touch your stylus in the center of the right screen at the same time. I got the sense that the developers really understood the limitations of this control style, and they try to help you at every opportunity. There is no combat at all, but your main obstacle in the game, the ghosts, actually don't appear as a real enemy until the third day, giving you more than enough time to get used to the clunky controls. The game is overall pretty easy, which is arguably essential for good horror. Nothing kills the scares faster than instant deaths, and Nameless Game tries to compensate with slow enemies and generous checkpoints. The game stumbles the most when it requires you to accomplish really specific objectives to move forward that aren't telegraphed in the amazing world or setting. For example, in this sequence, I have to run away from this ghost without actually running into this ghost, meaning that I have to just be standing near her while the other ghost catches me. How am I supposed to figure this out without dying a few times? Instances like this aren't frequent enough to make me dislike the game, but are worth mentioning. There weren't many first-person games on the DS by 2008, though Dementium the Ward did come out in 2007. The early 2000s had no shortage of Asian horror movies remade for American audiences, and with the Ring connection, it's crazy this game never came out worldwide. Square Enix actually ran focus groups on localizing this game, but the consensus was that it needed to have shooting in it in order for it to be successful in the US, which is crazy sad. Nameless Game was successful enough in its home country to spawn multiple sequels, the most prominent being its direct sequel, Nanashi no Geimu Me, or Nameless Game I, which came out a year after the original in 2009. Gameplay and graphics-wise, this game is an immediate step up. The controls are much tighter and allow strafing instead of the first game's tank controls. The games at the center of I are also evolved, with the RPG-style sections involving party members, or involving sneaking around to unlock doors that are also locked in the real world. Sort of. There's also a platforming second game that's one wrong step and you're dead. In practice, it's more of a runner than a traditional platformer, which is pretty par for the course for these games. While I has a lot going for it, it really underscores how the first Nanashi no Geimu was lightning in a bottle. The sequel straps on more content, more complicated concepts like your cursed eye that allows you to see the spirit world, that I think ultimately comes at the cost of the scares and the immersion of the first game. You see how the left screen, aka my left eye, is going nuts right now? This visual cue acts up as soon as you enter a room where a ghost is present, and it's just much less scary than relying on my ears in the first game. However, I takes place 1 year after the first game, so it's worth playing just to see how your friends are dealing with being pixels. Seems kinda cozy, actually. In any case, Nameless Game is a great series with a fun concept and the scares to back it up. There were other sequels for DSiWare and iOS and Android, but they are difficult to find. Thankfully, fan-translated ROMs of the first two are readily available, and they're both worth checking out. The translation is great, it was a team effort of no fewer than 6 people, and our hat is off to them. Though, if you're only going to check out one, make it the first game. Up next, it's time to team up for Sweet Home.
Yeah, we both got a lot to say about this one. Now, this channel has covered this game in the past, but I don't care. I'll take any excuse to talk about Sweet Home because I love this game so damn much.
Alright, developed by Capcom, it was released for the Famicom in late 1989, and though we don't know the exact reason, the game's graphic content and dark subject matter are likely the reason it never saw release outside of Japan.
Another possible reason might be the fact that Sweet Home is based on a Japanese movie of the same name, and licensing issues came with that. Also, it's primarily an RPG, a genre which hadn't yet caught on with Western audiences.
Okay, so there are a lot of reasons why this game never came over, but the important part is that the hardworking fans at Gaijin Productions and Suicidal Translations took it upon themselves to translate the game back in the year 2000.
And now English ROMs and reproduction carts are available for all, and if you're a horror fan and have somehow still not taken the plunge, you are missing out.
It's tough to cover this game in broad strokes because it actually does so many things. The easiest pitch for Sweet Home is that it's the literal precursor to Resident Evil. Resident Evil's development was actually started because Sweet Home director and Resident Evil producer Tokuro Fujiwara wanted to remake Sweet Home in gaming's burgeoning 3D era. And a lot of the main elements of Resident Evil are here. From mansions, keys, door animations, zombies, stories told through diaries and documents, to the gang solves a mystery. Item management and character swapping is actually pretty similar to Resident Evil 0, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Fans of survival horror games will pick it up pretty quickly, plus, no need to get yourself reacquainted with tank controls.
Sweet Home is shockingly robust for a Famicom/NES game. There are a lot of moving parts and they all mesh together beautifully. At its core, this is a very streamlined RPG with random battles and level progression. You play as 5 members of a documentary film crew trapped inside a haunted mansion. You can switch between the 5 members at any time and form up parties up to 3 in any order. The mansion is like one big dungeon, and exploring it will require depth attention to party and item management. To get around the dungeon, you'll need to overcome various traps and puzzles. This sometimes means using character-specific items like a vacuum to clear debris, or your very own Master of Unlocking. Other times, you'll need to procure items in the mansion. For example, here, I need a wooden board to cross a pit because I need to get that flashlight so that I can pass through these walls that block my path. And of course, I need a candle in the first place so I can see in this dark room. Like items, weapons are also found about the mansion as you progress, and though grinding is necessary at times, it's only for XP. The menus are a bit clunky and take some getting used to. Remember, the Famicom/NES only had 4 buttons, but it works because it never overcomplicates things.
But don't let that item management fool you. Sweet Home is a true horror experience. And it's a true horror experience because the stakes are high. If a party member dies, they're dead for good. One less set of hands changes your party dynamic drastically, and things in this mansion can turn pear-shaped in an instant.
Yeah, remember that pit I needed to cross with the wooden board? Well, those boards can fall out from underneath you, and if you don't have a party member nearby to pull them up, they'll die. There are also ghosts that will swoop up people and whisk them away to another room. Enemies are always one monster affairs, but if a character gets poisoned or cursed without the medic nearby to cure them immediately, they will die, so it's paramount you stick together. And this constant struggle to keep your party together and alive is persistent throughout the game's 8 to 10 hour campaign. It's never a dull moment in the haunted mansion of Sweet Home.
The graphics are top-notch as well. The environments are beautifully detailed, and the monster design is absolutely fantastic. I only wish there was more enemy variety so that I could see more designs in this style. I saw enough worms to last me a lifetime. I've always really enjoyed the music. Even if it is more atmospheric and less melodically driven than soundtracks of the time, it really sets the tone of the mansion very well. Sweet Home also boasts a few animated cutscenes, including Resident Evil's iconic door opening animation and one especially gruesome scene towards the end. This level of cinematic storytelling was rare for the Famicom and NES, especially for one released in 1989. The story itself, as we mentioned before, is largely the reason why we think Sweet Home never made it over to the US. I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say it's a complex story about love, tragedy, and ghosts that features a baby coffin, yet still manages to end on a high note.
One of the main reasons director Tokuro Fujiwara wanted to remake Sweet Home in the PlayStation 1 era was because he felt restrained by the limitations of the Famicom and felt that graphics had finally advanced to the point where he could tell a good story. No doubt the full story of Sweet Home is a little fragmented and tough to fully put together, but Fujiwara deserves credit for believing that the medium of video games could tell a mature and dark story. Sweet Home proved that you can do more with a video game. Another game from this era that successfully pulled this off was Namco's Splatterhouse, which thankfully did make it over to the US. I guess if you want to learn more about Sweet Home, you should check out this video I made 8 freaking years ago, but you're probably better off just downloading a translated ROM and experiencing it for yourself.
Or, if you have seen that video and are familiar with Sweet Home, it's an absolute masterpiece worth revisiting. Launchpad, what do you want? Do you want to do the shoot? Do you want to be in the shoot? Launchpad! Yay! Oh, good job. Oh, good sit. Oh, okay, goodbye. Launchpad hates the bathtub, so we gave him a nice little nook, little area for him to be while we do a little bit of shooting. Do a little bit of shooting. Here's my socks.
You actually give me the... You're fine.
Okay.
You're busy filming.
I'm busy.
I understand.
Oh, baby. Oh, there's so much happening. Oh.
Okay.
You just want all the attention. Launchpad. Launchpad, we're wrapping. Oh, you're naked. Launchpad, I'm so sorry you had to see that, but it's over now. The long nightmare is over. It's okay. You don't have to say anything. But we can get back to watching YouTube videos. Don't worry.
Grace, I'm still naked.
Dang!